Alright, now we're going to head out for session 6, getting ready for the Champcar 24-hour, just a couple weeks. This time we're going to quickly get right up all the way to speed. And we're going to start to dial in rotation. So looking at 3 things in this session. 1, how we come off the brake in conjunction with turning in, basically finishing our brake zones. And that starts the rotation. And then the coasting period, and all we have is our steering wheel to control everything about the car: attitude, speed, direction, rotation. And then finally how we get back on the gas to settle the car and begin to accelerate it. Not so much worrying about wide open throttle, but really the shape of the initial throttle application to either keep that rotation going, settle it down, or perhaps increase it, add some more rotation into the car. So after this first warm-up lap, try to keep the car maybe a little too stable in each corner. Maybe not quite enough rotation, but making sure to keep everything fully under control. And we can add more and more aggressive drifting, essentially, just off of the release of the brake, and then in a couple of the transitions that are not coming off the brake, like in the lower S's, roller coaster turning back to the left, and then hog pen turning back to the right. So for turn 1, really trying to get a nice tight rotation around the inside, keeping the car rotating just ever so slightly up towards the second apex. Just ever so slight rotation to get the car leaned into the apex for 3, but more stable for 4. Bit of rotation to get the car on the left side of the track, or at least mid-track, to get a good start into the lower S's. Coming out of turn 9, we need the car to be pretty settled so that we can have a little bit of rotation, just the slightest, to get the nose to bite into turn 10. Somehow didn't get a 1X. Anyway. So again, on this second full lap, we're going to try to under-rotate, just keep the car really stable. Pass the car gently from trail brake release to the initial throttle. The mid-engine layout, not letting the engine swing too quickly. See, like right there for turn 10, I probably could have used a little bit more rotation, probably would have made it down to the apex just fine. I'm going to start to try to get a little bit more rotation, but still keep it controlled. Try not to have to really counter steer. Alright, now we're going to add a little bit more rotation on this next one. A little bit more aggressive coming off the brake pedal. Try to get enough swing so, not that we have to save the car, but we're going to have to think about actually catching it. Definitely seems to be a little faster in some places with just a little bit more swing. Maybe clean up the lower S's a little. Alright, now we're really going to try to put a lot of rotation in it. Definitely seems to be quite a bit too much there. of a push to snap, it seems like, coming through turn 3. Car definitely wants to oversteer naturally just a tick out of the lower S's. It's kind of tricky to maintain just enough momentum in an oak tree to actually swing the rear end of the car. You definitely want to keep it a little steadier than that on an ideal lap at the top of the hill at roller coaster. Alright, that was a little sloppy, so in the next one we'll try to, next couple laps, try to dial in ideal rotation, and this time focusing on getting off the brake smoothly, just enough to keep that back end from really swinging wide and needing traction control. In this case, just get it leaned in just a little bit into the apex. And the transition in the lower S's, just a little bit of sliding. Definitely going to clean that up again. Try to extend the brake release into turn 10 up here. Just a little hot on exit of Oak Tree, but pretty decent through 10, actually getting the rotation, the nose to bite. And then through the first part of Oak Tree. Alright, now I'm going to try to nail coasting period, let the car settle just a little bit more before getting back on the throttle. Try to get that mid-corner part of the rotation settled. In 5 and 6, it's not quite a full lift, maybe halfway off the throttle, back on again. Just enough to shift some weight and get the car to get the nose to bite. Alright, now we're going to focus on finishing up that coasting period, how we get back on the throttle. I'm going to try to get back on the throttle just enough to keep the swing in the rear end for turn 1. Just creep back on the throttle for turn 3. In and out of the throttle smoothly for 4 and a 5 and a 6. Trying to time any lifting and back on the throttle for turn 9 along with the steering. And gently feeding it in as to not induce any understeer for turn 10. I'm going to try to match the rotation that I started with the brake with the throttle through the exit of Oak Tree. Trying to really continue the rotation off the brake and onto the throttle through the last 2 sections. I'm just going to try to connect everything naturally, come off the brake, get back on the throttle when it feels right for the next lap. A little too deep. Usually good for one of those a session. We'll try to do one more lap after this. Dial in the rotation using the pedals. So turn 1, trying to keep a tight rotation through both of the apexes. Just a gradual leaning of the car into turn 3. Smoothly past the car, in and out of the lower S's. Gently roll a ton of speed through turn 10. Carry a lot of speed into Oak Tree and then rotate through the second apex. Try to carry a lot of speed off the straightaway, and then rotate the car off the trail brake into 14. Smoothly transition back to 15. Float the car over 16 and down into 17. Alright, that was close enough, so let's take a cool down lap and bring it in. So before the session, we worked out brake zones and driving at the limit and all that. So at this point, just dialing in how we're getting really off the brake, letting the car coast, and then back on the throttle. And what we're trying to do is dial in the perfect amount of rotation in between turn in and apex. That's the point that basically sets up really the rest of the corner. Alright, so that wraps up session 6, dialing in rotation with the pedals. We'll reset and get a fresh car, and hop right into the next session. So now we're actually going to focus on the steering wheel. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're not leaving any steering input on the table. If we can apply any additional steering and actually get the car to keep turning, then we know there's potential to carry more momentum through whatever part of the corner where we're experiencing that. So for the first lap or so, what we're going to do is actually overturn the wheel and get the car to plow straight. And we want to do that pretty much right as we're beginning to coast, just coming off the brake. And really what that allows us to do is when we apply the throttle, unwind the wheel from a higher level of input at a starting point, which allows us a longer time where we can unwind the wheel. And the motion of unwinding the wheel is one that helps control and dial the rotation of the car to settle it back down and add stability to the rear end of the car so more power can be applied. So by making sure to get to full steering input, we're getting to the sweet spot of grip in the tire where it's fully rolled over, and then using that sweet spot for the longest amount of time possible as we unwind through that sweet spot. As in this case for the warm-up lap, we're going actually beyond it. So for the out lap, I like to overdo it to Really make sure I actually am getting past the sweet spot of grip and basically the cornering potential, but then dial it out a little bit at a time, lap after lap. So we'll still try to keep quite a bit of steering in here to make sure we've got it, make sure we're getting it for each corner, and make sure to try to get the timing right. I want to have too much wheel input early so that we can unwind through the apex. Starting to take wheel input out of the car, coming back towards neutral before even reaching the apex. This technique is typically more helpful in slower corners, less helpful in faster corners, but nonetheless can help. This exercise anyway can help figure out if there's maybe a little bit more time being left on the table in some of the faster corners. Alright, so I'm going to try to use just a little bit less steering and not miss the mark by so much. Kind of tricky to get it right in the lower S's with the weight shifting around so much. Place like the lower S's, probably not going to want to have a ton of steering input on an ideal lap. It's good to figure out where that limit is and be able to control that. Basically control maximum steering input through those transitions, but probably isn't going to lead to the fastest lap. However, definitely helps to get to full steering in roller coaster and hog pen. So now we've gone over the top for a few laps. I'm going to try to dial it in a little closer. It's pretty good through turn 1 and 2. Not going over the top too much. Feel the front end as force feedback give up just quite a bit once you go over the limit, so I'm trying to feel that for just a moment. Just keep things tight through the lower S's. It definitely helps to get to maximum steering for the second apex in Oak Tree, turn 12. So that wraps up session 7, making sure to turn the wheel. Basically head out on track and try overturning the wheel, getting the car to plow, and doing that in between turn in and apex. Making sure to get that timing right each corner, each lap, and then start to dial out that steering input until you get to just the right amount where you're using all the input that's possible without overdoing it and inducing understeer condition that isn't desirable. What we're trying to do is get the car pointed up the track, use as much of the sweet spot of grip in the tire as possible, set the car up to unwind the wheel for as long of a time period as possible, starting before reaching the apex. And that helps stabilize the car to apply power while keeping the most amount of steering input, therefore the most amount of directional change up the track in a positive way as possible. Remembering that each corner around the track is a little bit different. More steering input in the slower corners like roller coaster, hog pen, turn 1, turn 4, and less than the faster corners like turn 3, turn 10. So we're going to refresh the car and hop right in for session 9, which is all about keeping the car flat. This is inspired by driver coach Rob Wilson. There's a video of him working with Valtteri Bottas on how he just comes off the brake in conjunction with the steering in a way to try to keep the car as flat as possible. And also, Rob talks about introducing flat car pauses in between transitions, letting the weight settle and transition out of one corner before turning into the next corner. So as we head out on track to apply some of the flat car concepts, the first is introducing the inputs. Basically take the edge off of any sharpness and change of direction when getting on the brake and when getting off the brake. Similarly, when getting back on the throttle, or if we're lifting off the throttle in the middle of a turn, like here, into the lower S's, that is also done with a little bit of an introduction before coming off more aggressively. And that allows just a little weight transfer to move in the car and settle, minimizing the total amount of weight transfer that's going to occur. And that's the whole goal, to keep the car as settled as possible, to minimize the weight transfer. Even though grip is gained on the outside tires when we're turning, or the front tires when braking, or the rear tires when accelerating, the total amount of grip across all 4 tires is reduced, because the amount of grip that's lost off of, for example, the front tires when accelerating exceeds the amount of grip that's gained in the rear tires. Similarly, the amount of grip that's lost off the inside tires when cornering exceeds the amount that's gained on the outside tires. So if we want to maximize the total amount of grip and therefore cornering potential and to maximize the momentum that can be carried, we have to minimize the amount of weight transfer really at all stages in the corner, and in corner complexes minimize the weight transfer between those corners. Best way to review this, make sure you're doing it right, is actually to review it, look at some footage from outside the car. It should look smooth and flat. Sometimes it means that corrections need to happen quickly, and that's basically to nip it in the bud, if you will, to keep, for instance, if you're making a correction, you're trying to keep a car from swinging too much, or maybe to get it to swing a little bit more. Maybe you're adjusting speed, but the less that you can do that, or the more quickly, I should say, that you can do that, and the less time you can take to do that, the less the car swings out of shape. So even though it might require quick input to stop the car from rotating, it's actually smoother from an external point of view, which is really what flat car is all about. Keeping that weight distributed evenly, keeping some travel available in the suspension at all times to continue to absorb whatever little bumps might be in the road, curbing, etc. At this point, I'm trying to work out a balance of just how much rotation and lean is needed to be effective. I want to take the edge off the inputs, but I don't want to take too much off so that we lose some of the effective rotation of the car. Basically want the minimum amount of inputs to get the perfect amount of change of direction, whatever that might be. Take maybe 1 or 2 laps. Continue to try to dial in a fast, flat car. Alright, and one more lap. Just a little late at turn 10 to figure out how to get the speed out of the car so I can roll just a little bit more, but otherwise trying to keep the momentum stable definitely helps. Got one more corner. And we'll end on a fast lap. Take a gentle cool down lap before pitting in. So that wraps up session 9, flat car. Definitely check out Rob Wilson. I'll be able to explain it best with some excellent students on video. There's a video with Karun Shandok, again Valtteri Bottas, and then a couple random automotive journalists who were lucky enough to get a ride along with Rob. If you notice, at no point in the first 9 sessions am I really focusing too much or really at all on the lap timer itself. Helps to glance at the predictive just as a validation if something is quicker or slower, but really the final lap time, that doesn't really matter. It's really just about working out the ins and outs of VIR until I finally have it nailed. And it's only at this point where smooth actually is fast, just like in this flat car session. And that doesn't mean slow inputs all the time. Sometimes it means a very fast input to put a correction in the car to keep a mistake from getting too out of hand. But anyway, at this point, it's time to turn on the lap timer. So we'll come into the pits here to wrap up session 9. And next time out, I'll start timing laps, and there's a couple structured lap time exercises. Help push to find just a little bit more time and start to pull everything all together, internalize the rhythm.